Welcome, Peter Lin, to Asians in Art.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Trying to introduce you is difficult because you wear many hats, but we'll get to all those different hats. But basically, you are a jazz trombonist, composer, educator, and ... Take us back to the beginning. You were you born in Baton Rouge?
I say that in my bio, but honestly, I was only there for 1 year. So
not much memory.
Exactly. My dad's a chemical engineer, and I believe at the time he was working for Exxon or something along those lines, and they wanted him to travel for work for certain places. So that's was where he was, kind of stationed at the time, was down in Louisiana.
So then you went from Baton Rouge to New Jersey, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I grew up in New Jersey, starting at 1 or 2, something like that.
So how did you actually become exposed to music?
Actually started off the same way a lot of the Asian people around me started off, which is piano and violin. So I started out with a Suzuki method for violin.
We know that very well.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of ear training that way, and just learning really simple children's songs and stuff. I picked up trombone in 3rd grade, and that was for school band. So that's how I started.
It was told that you do this, or did you choose it yourself?
We had the option to choose instruments at 3rd grade. So basically, they told us to write on a piece of paper the top 10 instruments that you wanted to play. And at the top was like trumpet, it was like drums, it was saxophone. Trombone was like 7 or 8 on the list. But because I have the last name Lin and they went alphabetical, I was more towards the end. And so all the kids that wanted to play those instruments, which is like all of them, took all those instruments. But they didn't tell me that. They just said, like, oh, here's all these, you can play the mouthpiece of certain instruments, or like, here's the sticks. Like, just test out and see which ones you like and which ones, feel natural to you. And of course, they just kind of like, ushered me towards the trombone mouthpiece. They're like, yeah, you sound great on that, even though I probably didn't. And then, so I was the only low brass instrument for elementary school because of that. Yeah, no one else wanted to play an instrument. So,
but there's a difference with starting on the trombone and going from classical music to actually becoming a jazz musician.
Yeah, I think a lot of my early jazz training, I really attribute to really good teachers back when I was growing up. I grew up in a suburban neighborhood, Whippany, New Jersey. And, they had some really good music teachers around, both private and in the public school. And so we actually started, you don't start off with jazz band, early on. A lot of times it's like concert band, wind ensembles, stuff like that. We didn't really start jazz band until middle school. And then once we started jazz band, that's when I really, I guess, started to get to know the music. And at that point, I was also going to the library a lot to go check out music. And so they had a librarian there that just moved in, and he was really interested in jazz. So he knew that I played trombone. He's like, oh, yeah, you should go check out the jazz section and take out these CDs. And so, some of my first albums were like Art Blakey, Curtis Fuller, that kind of stuff. And that kind of hit me to a lot of that music. And it's just something that really was very different listening experience for me, because I grew up, my parents really listened to a lot of classical music and Christian rock music.
What was your appreciation of jazz music like? What was it about jazz that you really gravitated towards?
So when I'm hearing music that has like an organized melody, and then all of a sudden you have like, this arc and like this journey that like a musician takes you through, that is improvised. It feels very liberating, and that's something that I really latched onto as a kid. I listened to my taste in music, especially in high school, was very wide. I listened to a lot of actually like Japanese rock music and pop music because I was really into anime at that time too. So listening to a lot of openers. But I also was really into like metal. Yeah, symphonic power metal. Yeah, was like one of my things. So I think I just liked a lot of different types of music. But jazz, for whatever reason, was always like in the back of my mind as like, wow, like you can really, do something different in this type of music.
Can you perhaps go a little bit more into the idea of improvisation, just for our listeners who may be not so familiar with jazz or what that may mean?
Well, first of all, improvisation exists in a lot of different types of music. In Indian classical music, there's improvisation, right? In certain folk music, there's improvisation. There's the ability to express oneself over a form or organized set with your own language. And so I always try to explain improvisation more as a language, right? Because it's not like we just go up there and just make whatever up, it's not like we're just instantaneously
Random
composing.
notes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're all trying to communicate to each other. And so by learning the language of jazz, then you're able to improvise within that context.
But it is built on theory, isn't it? That how music is structured and how...
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of theory, but it's like, at the end of the day, it's like more oral art form, right? So there's certain phrases and there's certain melodies and certain types of way to navigate through the harmony that is very traditional and has been around for a very long time, and that's the way that the music has progressed. So by learning this like set of language, syntax kind of thing, then you're able to put that together into sentences, put it together into paragraphs, and then eventually your own story. Yeah.
I'm always so fascinated about what's going on in a jazz musician's mind when they improvise. Is there ever a wrong note?
Yes. Well, no and yes, right? Like, so when a lot of musicians, when they're improvising, I think the goal is that we don't want to be thinking about anything, right? Because when we're practicing, we are basically trying to work out all the harmonic and melodic and rhythmic language. And then when we get together, we just want to be able to express what we want to say to each other and to have that communication, right? So it's not like we're thinking about English, as we're speaking it in the, unless it's your first time or something. But, if it's natural, then it's just, you're just talking, right? So usually it's like I'm not thinking about anything when I'm improvising, but I try not to.
Was it Miles Davis or Herbie Hancock? But one of those musicians said that initially when they play a wrong note, it's how they recover from that afterwards.
Exactly.
And then later it's like, well, it actually wasn't a wrong note. It was actually a great note.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to kind of know how to do those things, right? Because if I try to tell someone that's first learning how to improvise, there's never a wrong note, forget it. It's game over. Because they're like, then I don't have to think about anything, right? Everything is right. But again, there should be some kind of established foundation, right? Yeah. Like when people first listen to John Coltrane, like maybe late, mid 60s, right? Then they're like, this sounds really chaotic and random. But like, the reason it sounds that way is not because he is playing that, but it's like layers and layers of foundational things stacked on top of each other. And the result is something that sounds really complicated, right? But at the root of it, he comes from playing the blues, right? Which is kind of the foundation of this music. And so it's just something that you kind of train your ear to pick up on the more that you listen to this music, That's why I also always go back to listening to jazz, because no matter what, I feel like that's like a lot of music just comes from, when I talk about jazz, I'm really talking about like Black American music, and I feel like a lot of foundation of popular music here in America comes from Black American music.
Nowadays, how do you infuse your sort of influences into the music that you write and play?
I guess I'll take it back to when I was in college. When I was first learning this music and learning that it comes from Black American roots, it's something that I personally always felt like, I'm just an outsider coming in and trying to learn this music, but I can never really be a part of the music, I just didn't look the part or feel the part. And but over time, as I started to play with older jazz musicians that were seasoned in this music and has lived this music, a lot of what they told me is that, it's not about that you can't play this music, right? It's the fact that like we're all on the bandstand together, it doesn't matter what color you are, as Miles Davis said, right? You could be green. I don't care, right? It's the fact that we're able to tell our story and help each other tell that story. It's a very democratic, music. And then, so I started to explore more of what makes me, and as I thought about it, I grew up in a very Taiwanese household, and, the music I was listening to was not jazz at home, right? It was a lot of different things, including karaoke music, my parents would do that every weekend with their church friends. During college is when I started to really explore my Taiwanese side. Before that, I kind of rejected it. I grew up being bullied as an Asian American or having certain Asian cultural influences, right? So college was kind of like my kind of coming back to it phase. And so as I explored my own culture again, I started to learn more about the music that my parents were listening to, my grandparents grew up listening to. And I just really loved the melodies that came from Taiwanese culture. I started to take some of the music from Teresa Tang, who was a very famous. Yeah, exactly. So I started to take some of those melodies, very popular melodies like Moon Represents My Heart and Sweet as Honey. I would take those and kind of infuse it with a lot of the things that I was currently listening to at that time, like Cedar Walton and Art Blakey, and kind of like that vibe. And so I kind of did a marriage of the two. And that's on my first record called With Respect, which I had released a year after my, undergraduate.
Show it.
On here, I have like a combination of different Taiwanese songs, but also songs from China that at that time my girlfriend, but now my wife, had suggested that I put onto the album as well.
So I was saying earlier that With Respect, we listened to it, and it's amazing how you would think jazz and Chinese music, like melding, doesn't work, but it actually works.
Sometimes when I'm watching Cantonese opera, I feel as if they're riffing off each other.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of like really deep folk music has that vibe, right? When you really dig deep into, like, I was listening to a lot of Taiwanese Aborigines music for a while, and I was really interested to see the differences between the different tribes. Some are more harmonically advanced, some are more rhythmically advanced. They kind of concentrate on different parts of what makes music. But at the end of the day, it does a lot of like traditional music kind of feels kind of improvised in a sense. And I mean, like, if you really think about it, all music is improvised, even classical music. I mean, it's not like Bach was, they only wrote it down because that was what was necessary. But in order for them to create it, they had to compose it out of something, it was coming from them. So
this is so cliche, and we always ask our guests, but it doesn't seem like your parents were against you becoming a jazz musician or a profession. Or am I wrong?
I mean, they at first, so I decided I want to become a jazz musician sophomore year of high school. Yeah. And so when I told my parents, they're like, so how are you going to make, how are you going to make money? How are you going to make a living? Are you going to teach? Blah, 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 blah. So my agreement with them was like, look, I'll go for music ed and performance double degree. But I did drop out of the education degree first year. At the end of the day, as you know, they just want to know that you're going to be all right at the end of the day. But it didn't take them long for them to come around after I told them. I think it was just like maybe a couple of months, and they're like, all right, we give up, I guess. I guess you could do music, but obviously they still encouraged me to do well in academia and stuff like that. So it's not, I also really like physics. I was actually thinking about like acoustic engineering as like a possible route, because that would be still in the music realm, but that just didn't work out. So I just went for.
Are you at a stage where you're like, yeah, I think I'm good.
I'm okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people say it's like a 10-year mark within the, I guess, like for how long you've been playing for before it starts feeling comfortable, feel like you're integrated into the scene and everything like that. So I've been playing this music for 14, 15 years now, professionally, I would say, so I feel like now I'm in a position where I can do things that I want to do and put out, my projects are being seen in different spaces. And with the education stuff going on as well, I teach at Jazz House Kids, an established nonprofit in Montclair, as well as New Jersey Youth Symphony. All those different things kind of like, allow me to be able to play music whenever I feel. And, that was kind of the goal.
Which is a big difference from when, back in maybe in the 20s or 30s or 40s, where the path to becoming a jazz musician is to play in the clubs. Is that correct?
I think the performance aspect of playing back in the day with touring, like touring, they used to go out for like a whole year and then come back. Now it's like you go out for maybe a week and then come back, right? So the economics of the music business has changed drastically. The pay has stayed the same.
Oh, yeah.
$100 gig like 10 years ago is still a $100 gig today, right?
That doesn't make sense, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so I think what's happening now is more like with jazz education, it's becoming more of a viable route for a lot of people, or they find other means to, be able to supplement, as I say, their jazz addiction. It's kind of like you have to find a lot of different routes to make it, in this music and try to find a quote unquote career.
Do you think you would not be able to survive if you weren't doing, like, you're head of a production company too? You do audiovisual stuff, and you teach as well. If you think that if you didn't have those things, then you wouldn't be able to survive as a jazz musician?
Yes and no. Like, I feel like if I'm currently doing what I'm doing, then I absolutely will not. That's just the truth of it. And I think a lot of people can relate to that as well. But if I worked, some kind of like 9-to-5 job and was regular like that, I feel like the music is so much part of me at this point that it would be hard for me not to try to be out there and like really try to play this music, But either way, like, I definitely feel like, having, this production company and teaching is really, that's really necessary, in this day and age, for sure.
You also do gaming, is that right?
Music,
yes.
Right?
Yeah, gaming. I watch a lot of anime. I game a lot. This is something that I grew up, again, like, I think as I get older, I always go back to the things that, like, I grew up with. And so, I played like all the consoles. I've watched like countless shows and stuff. And so I actually implement a lot of that stuff into my music as well. I have certain bands that play anime music and video games. Final Fantasy music. That's right. Yeah. Any Final Fantasy fans out there. But
I saw a video of you doing that, and I thought, were you Strife? Or what
Cloud Strife.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I thought, did he dye his hair for that? But then I see that you still have it. So.
Well, it was a wig.
Oh, it was a wig.
Yeah, this is a new thing. This is a new thing.
Okay.
This is something my wife was like, oh, let's go do our hair together. And I was like, okay, sure. And so, like, I just got it, bleached. Yeah. I hear blondes have more fun. That's this is what has been told to me. I don't know if that's true or not.
Asian blondes
Asian
have
blondes
more
are fun. Yeah, exactly.
I
But yeah, I feel like it's a vibe, you know. So I like it, you know. So I do, with cosplay usually if I'm doing that kind of music, because it just adds to the fun of it. And so I've been doing that for about 2 and some years. Yeah, during the pandemic, I was also deep into the Final Fantasy music stuff. I had a bunch of projects that implemented that music, and I do like jazz arrangements of those too. So
out of everything, what do you like doing best?
What do I like doing best? I don't, honestly, I just like, I think when you guys came to the show at 5 Spot, like that quartet stuff, I think just me playing like jazz standards and tunes is probably my favorite thing to do. And just like in a small group context too. Like I love big bands, but I also just love to play. I just be able to love to, communicate with other musicians in that way in an improvised context. That's probably my favorite thing to do. But I feel like the most fulfilling thing for me is more about how the audience takes away the music that they've listened to. So I feel like the stuff I do with AAPI Jazz Collective, the stuff I do with Cat Bus Collective, which is all anime Ghibli stuff, I feel like for me that's the most fulfilling in terms of like introducing people to jazz.
Well, the AAPI Jazz Collective you just mentioned, is also really a vehicle to help, artists, right? Asian American, Pacific Islander artists to be out there with their stuff. So, I think that's also important too, right? To support artists in the genre that you're in.
Oh, most definitely. Asians in jazz is very much a topic that is not as explored. It has definitely been explored, but it's definitely more on the West Coast. People like John Jang and Francis Wong, they're very big, advocates for Asians in jazz. And they've been doing that since like the 70s, more in like the California area, which is amazing because at that time, Asian American was not even a term, really. And so for them to do that was pretty interesting. But here on the East Coast, it's something that it just wasn't around. So I actually created the AAPI Jazz Festival because of this need for it. And also because I grew up in this music not knowing that other Asians could play this music. I know a couple, but like it wasn't a lot. And so all the bands that I was playing at early on in my career, I was just like, I don't see anyone that looks like me.
In the 90s, when I was here, I wasn't living here yet full time, but I was studying here. But I did go to jazz clubs then, and there weren't really a lot of Asian jazz musicians at the time. But now there are so many more of them.
Visibility is definitely a lot easier now. But I feel like, I'm not sure how I feel about this yet, but this is just my observation, is that at least Asian male musicians are not as much in the forefront. And that's the same, but I feel like what art is always reflective of society, right? So it's the same as it is in Hollywood.
Do you think also it's all the instrument too that you play? Because I've read that trombone, you alluded earlier, it's very difficult to play, obviously, because there's no keys. And then in terms of like playing very fast music, like a bebop, I heard that it's very challenging. So a lot of trombonists are relegated to more the sidemen rather than the frontmen. What are your views on that?
Yeah, you're very hip to that. Yeah, for sure. I think trombone is a hard instrument for a call. It's we often say it's like last to hire, first to fire. That's how trombonists feel. But a lot of it's because it's just like, it's not, like you said, it's not an instrument that's virtuosic in nature. It's something that lies in a weird range, it's like more like cello range. So it's not something that's like necessarily a solo instrument. And it's not a rhythm section instrument either. Bass players work the most because everyone always needs a bass player, but not everyone always needs a trombone player, right? So part of it is that the instrument choice. But, there's so many horn players that are just doing fine, too. I think a lot of it just comes down to, like, how much you want to put out your own projects. I think a lot of people that are coming out of college, they have the notion that as soon as they're out, they're just going to get called for a bunch of different gigs as a sideman and go and perform all around the world doing these different things.
But the honest truth is that there's more people playing this music than there are gigs. And so, you do have to kind of find, especially nowadays, you find your niche, you find your community. That's kind of like really important, more so in the past 10 years than before.
Why more so in the past?
Because jazz music as a whole, in terms of just economics and marketability and all that kind of stuff, is definitely not as prominent as it used to be, and a lot of it just comes down to like moving more into the academic space as well. I think as jazz continues to become more and more academic, in nature of like more and more colleges offering it, the less and less it becomes like something you go out to on a random night, and more so something that it's like a museum. As Miles Davis said, it's becoming more like a museum.
So in a way, it's a contradictory in terms. It's
because it's music of the people. But like as it gets brought into different spaces, it gets viewed more as like, elite. So you need to drink wine while you listen to this music and have a nice little night out.
Have our cigarette.
Yeah, but like this music really comes from the hood, and I mean honestly, I grew up like going to a lot of jam sessions, and a lot of the jam sessions were like in Newark and Patterson, and like. I definitely don't belong in those areas, but I would go because that's where the music was, and that's where the music lived, and that's where people really went to enjoy the music. They knew the music coming into it. They know the songs, they know the repertoire. But, a lot of jam sessions that, I didn't know the music that well. So sometimes I get lost in the form, or sometimes I wouldn't play in the right key, or like, you know what I mean? Like there's certain things that I just go like, oh my God, and play in front of people that I really respected.
Yes.
And then they hear me play. I'm just like, oh God, and on top of that, there's also like being Asian, there's a lot of self-inflicted hate. That you do to yourself unnecessarily, It's like, oh man, I could have done better, and like what, I disgrace my family,
Being the Asian, the model, role model, right?
Yeah, exactly. And when I first started playing too, I felt like I was representing like Asians in jazz. That's
Asians
in jazz. Like I felt like I encompassed that because I was the only one around. So anytime they told me, oh, where are you from? It's like, oh, my parents are from Taiwan, but I'm born here. But then you always get that feeling. They ask because it's like, oh, how did you learn this? I've been asked like, where do you learn this music? Like you're like, So when I go up and play, it feels like I need to present something more than myself, right? So it's something that I like really worried about for a long time, but I've kind of got over a lot of those things and kind of came to peace with that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, you can feel it in the AAPI album that you released last year. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful album. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. AAPI Jazz Collective is the representation of all of us embracing our own cultures in this music. That's we got copies.
I got a copy.
Hey, it's out on the list.
A CD player.
It's also on Bandcamp. Okay. But it's a culmination. So AAPI Jazz Collective has been around for about 5 or 6 years now. We've never had an album. This is our first debut album. And it's a collection of everyone's arrangements of their own respective cultures, music, brought into the jazz space. So a lot of them are rearrangements of classic songs, either we grew up with or our parents grew up listening to, and presenting it on this album. And it's really funny culmination of music too, because there's some anime music on there as well. So some of that's
Your
like that's my own premonition. But
so what were your pieces that you arranged?
So let's see. The ones I had was Alishan Girl, which is a Taiwanese song. And that was interesting because Alishan refers to the Alishan Mountains in Taiwan. It refers to the specific tribe that's over there. But originally when it was composed by Chinese composers that were looking at the tribes and then be like, oh, the tribes sound like this kind of music, right? So it's kind of like if the American made something about Native Americans but has no Native American background. It's the same kind of thing. Except now I'm an Asian American taking that piece and viewing it through my own lens. So it's kind of like many times removed from the original source.
So when you do recordings, is it more structured than, let's say, if you're performing on a stage? Is there much room for improvisation with your musicians?
Yes, it's definitely more structured in terms of what we're going to play and how we're going to play it. But in terms of the actual solos that happen in between the melody, those are more improvised, right? And then also, like, sometimes we add little things into the melody that's not necessarily there. But it's just something that we feel like would be fun to add in. Yeah. So.
And this is something that you would be doing regularly.
You mean recording? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
As a AAPI collective.
It's if we get yeah.
It's always there.
Exactly. Like I'm always hesitant to say it, but yes, it always comes down to budget, right? Because this is a self-funded project, and this is something I really wanted to put out because I didn't have a new albums for like 5 or 6 years or something, right? So that was something that I felt like was necessary. But obviously, if there's certain grants or certain things that help to fund a project, then I'm definitely down to do it again. But it is a larger group. So like my next album, I'm trying to plan for maybe like a quartet album, just like for kind of similar to what you saw the other day. Like I'm thinking about that context. It's just economically viable too.
So before we go, we always ask our guests, tips or advice for aspiring musicians like yourself. Sure. Do you think that schools now are really equipping future musicians to survive and thrive in this world?
Yeah, I feel like if anything, a lot of colleges do offer classes that teach you about like how to do your taxes, how to be a band leader, how to show up to gigs, properly and stuff like that. So I feel like the professionalism that comes with music, that's something that you should pay attention more to as you're learning this music. So as you're learning music from your mentors, don't just ask them how to play, but also ask what's your day-to-day life like as a musician? How do you prepare for a gig? Blah, blah, blah. Like those small little things are going to help you stay working. And it's something you don't want to learn the hard way. Yeah, you should be as prepared as possible before entering what we call the scene, the working musician lifestyle.
What was the key advice that you got from your mentor or mentors?
So number one was just show up on time, always dress appropriately, always look over the music before you get there, But, these things seem obvious, but honestly, there's some musicians who don't even think about that. The other thing was seek out mentors that are doing things that are similar to your goals, right? So when I was first starting out, I didn't think about taking lessons with someone that had kind of a similar background as me, or wanted to do a similar thing as I was doing. I just thought about this person's a really good musician. I'll go take a lesson with them. But I didn't really think about maybe I don't necessarily want to do the same things that they're doing, right? So that was a big word of advice that I got from a trumpet player, Frank Green, who works quite a bit. So, yeah.
Niels, thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's a pleasure being here.
Talking to you.
Yeah.